Hey Gouache Lovers, hello Newbies, welcome. I am using the jelly gouache today and I'll be using that for my artwork. I also have e-classes where I do demo of my artwork. If you are interested, go over by Patreon and hit that. I currently have 2 tiers and you can find out which one is most suitable for you. Alright, so definitely check the Patreon site out. So today's material, I will be using the Jelly Gouache, Archer's Press cold pressed water paper, 300 GMSI, and that also you might need 2 brushes synthetic, 7 and 11, paper towel, 2 containers of clean water, and also just I take down the sketchbook. Alright, not the sketchbook, the sketch pad. Alright, so let's begin. So I will be doing the moon and clouds for you today. So I have activated my jelly gouache, which is the blue. I'm doing a deep blue, trying to make the sky. So I'm doing a technique. It is called wet on dry. So the paper is dry and the paint is wet. Alright, so what I'm doing is outlining my moon in order to get a nice border so I don't blend anything into the moon unless I really want to. So this is a little bit delicate. You have to be slow and gentle. I did do an outline, but sometimes the outline might get messed up into, so you want to be very careful when you are making your ring around your moon. Alright, making an outline does help, and that is a better way in order to have nice, clean, smooth transitions. Although you might encounter little rough edges, harsh lines around the moon, but the great thing with gouache is that you can blend it out using the blending technique of the drag and pull, and also gouache can be reactivated. So quick tip to note, always remember gouache can be reactivated. Also, the best idea when layering gouache is to make a wash first. When you make a wash, it actually seeps into the paper and being absorbed, which makes it much better to layer your gouache instead of the paint sitting on top of the paper, and then it just leaves a flaky look. So I like to use gouache in a watercolor kind of a manner because I do love staining and texturing and that kind of effect. So I'm that kind of an artist that loves to allow the water to do an effect on my artwork. Alright, so if this is something that you like, thank you, and I know you will stick with me. So each artist find their own different technique, and mine is staining, and I love it. What I'm doing is outlining my moon with some effects. I like when the water do this dramatic effect, and I don't mess with it. I just enhance it a bit because it obviously is trying to tell me something. So when you're doing your art, you want to watch your paper, relax, and make it happen. So I've gone ahead and I'm adding in some blue highlights because I'm trying to form my cloud. The idea is to make the clouds, and once I've started making the cloud, I don't want to go ahead and mess with the background afterwards. So I'm doing my foundational layer. This is my second layer, so I made sure that my first layer, my first wash, was already dry. If it's not totally dry, having it damp is also great. Okay, so because I'm looking for that slight hint of blue in my cloud when I do it, meaning I don't want to add too much blue to creating the cloud itself, but I want it to be in the background. So hence my layer is blue, a blue wash for my first layer, and then a nice deep blue for my highlights. And I'll use the deep blue and play around with when forming the clouds. All right, so go ahead and do that if you're painting along. So I'm covering now the base, so there's no wash showing through. Not completely, just still playing around to form the idea of where my cloud is going to be formed. So I'm doing that. It's called layering, and I'm just using a damp brush. So I'm using a damp brush. At this time my consistency is more not a wash, it's more like it's not coffee, it's more, and it's not too pasty, so it's in between a coffee and tea kind of a wash. If you listen to my other video, you will learn a little bit more about the different methods and techniques of gouaching. So I'm doing my moon. I didn't clean my brush at all because I want a little bit of that blue to form in. Just remember that you don't have to use clean water for every time you use your brush, meaning if you want an effect and your brush already have that slight hint, go ahead and play with that. You don't have to wash it up clean and then try to recreate the same shade. You can use the shade that's already on it by diluting it and adding some more. So I'm creating my moon by adding that deep royal blue, a hint of white, and what I'm doing is blending paint in paint. So I didn't add much water to it. I just keep picking up a bit of blue and black, and then after I've done that and I got the consistency that I want with the paint in paint blending, then I added a bit of water, just a bit of tip on my brush to go ahead and get it to move. So this is more like a nice creamy kind of a flow to it. See how I'm just smoothing it around, meaning I don't have to use force or anything, just a little bit of water, so it still forms a wash kind of a base, but it is moving, so a nice creamy texture to it. And then I go ahead and sweep that along, so my brush is flexible to move and bend, and I'm not adding the paint directly from the tube. So I've pre-mixed it, paint on paint, meaning a little bit of the white and a little bit of the deep blue. I added a hint of black because I wanted to deepen the color a bit to get a nice gray, slight ash tone because it's my moon. And then I add a bit of water to blend all three colors out. And I'm just using the water that's already on my palette to activate and to do a lot of blending with whatever remaining paint or gouache is left. So I'm not using a whole lot of water for your actual body of your work. Depending on what you're trying to achieve, you don't have to add a lot of water. Remember, gouache is meant to be opaque and not translucent or transparent. Okay, so I'm also using that same mix to kind of play around with my cloud, because everything is supposed to blend nicely and have a smooth transition back into the main body. And that is what I'm trying to achieve, as well as I'm trying to work out the rest of the paint that's there as not to waste it, and just applying it to my paint, giving it like a variation, because it's not going to hurt it. It will only improve it because it's the same shade, and it's going to work to my benefit if I do it like that. So I want to go ahead now and consider my next step, and that is playing around with my interior of the moon, meaning I'm trying to add some dramatic effect, because when you look at the moon, it's not blah, like just white or gray, well, not really white, but ashy or just staying there. It actually have some textures inside, some layers. It looks a bit grayish, like pockets of holes. It looks weird but cute. So I'm trying to add that dramatic effect to it by using a hint of white and mixing it around a little bit too in my same blue because I don't want to lose the tone. Also, another tip, whenever you are mixing a body of for the body of your work, please go ahead and mix a lot. Not overdoing a lot, but enough that you know even if you run out, you will be able to have extra. You can do touch up and so forth with, because if you lose that wash and it's all done, you might not be able to recreate the exact tone and look and be able to apply it to the partially finished area. It's gonna look a bit weird because it's gonna dry differently, unless that is what you are looking for. So remember to go ahead and mix a whole lot, not overdoing, but enough to have left over for retouches, highlights, and so forth, because you might miss a spot, just saying, and you want to go ahead and have that touched up. So my moon is coming along a bit well. What I'm doing is not using a reference. I just want to work from my mind. The outline in the initial sense was a partial reference, but at the end of the day, you want the artwork to become yours. So you go ahead and get a reference idea, but not definitely a reference that you are trying to replicate. You just want the idea of the positioning, the shading, and just how the it is textured and layers look. So you can actually add that to your artwork just to make it look a bit more like a real subject as opposed to a whimsical or a fairy tale kind of a piece. So my moon is not too bad. I'm just playing around with it to allow it to dry, and once it is dry, then I will start adding a second layer. So what I'm doing this technique here, you notice I'm just dipping right into the jelly gouache itself. This technique is called straight from the tube or the cup. It is to be used at the end of the project. So in my idea at this moment, I will not be overworking my moon. So what I'm doing is adding highlight to my moon, because that is going to be it for the moon. I'm not going to add another layer to it on top of it. So I'm adding straight from the tube or straight from the cup. That's the technique that it is called. So it's going to be a little bit more textured, and you'll get a slight rise in because it's not mixed. And the first color I used was a nice cool lavender. It's more like a periwinkle. I'm sorry, because it's a shade between the white. I'm sorry I didn't have it on camera. Shade between the white and a hint of blue to it. I'm also now working with my clouds. I'm going in a circular motion, a circular dragon motion, trying to get those high points in my cloud. And what I did was get a bit from the gouache, placed it in my mixing palette, and then started to add it straight on, like mix it in there all by itself and then add it. So that is called the straight from the tube. But because I want it to flow, I'm adding a bit of water, not a lot, just enough to wet my paintbrush so it can actually mix. And the first portion that I did, excuse me, I allowed the cloud to just have that first layer up top where I don't blend into it, even though your cloud is like a nice big spread and then you have different gradients and transition. I don't want to do that right away because I want the layers to dry. Once the layers are dry with the white, when you first have your outline, then when you start making those additional white, like extreme white, and on top of that layer, you actually see the cloud a bit better instead of doing one full sweep and then you get your cloud get lost, like the different layer. I want it to look as if it's moving. So the filler portion of it, meaning see those blue areas in between that look spaced out, I left those because I want it to be a thinner layer, like a nice smoky shade below. So when I go to add my second layer or my filler with a direct white straight from the tube with a slight mix, it will become much more pronounced or outstanding because you've already allowed the first layer to dry, and then once it is dry and you go on top, you will see it more visibly. I'm also not wasting my blue. So at the end, I'm just using the wash and whatever water is left in the palette to go ahead and just use that as a filler. So what I'm doing is filling right now. If you can tell, I'm so sorry, I don't know why my camera is shaking so much. If you can tell, the filler layer is much thinner, hence you see the blue shining through, which is lovely. So it does make for a beautiful sky, and that it's not a drabby looking blue shade coming through. Okay, so this is also another tip. If you don't want your white to get dirty, please use either a spoon, I don't know, something to actually take your white out that you have on hand. You don't have to go and buy any equipment or material, but for me, I don't mind because I'm just using a hint of it and I can clean it up later with my other brush. You can either use another brush or a spoon that's dedicated for painting, of course, and use it to get your paint actually out. But with that, you have to do a lot of wiping and cleaning if you're taking different shades, because you don't want to get it mixed up with the other paint colors too. All right, so with me dipping into the blue and into the white, you probably don't want to do that. Okay, hence I'm doing it, so I'm telling you not to, because I've learned to not to do it. So I'll try not to get my white dirty. You're going to be using your white a whole lot. Unfortunately, they only provide one tube of white in this entire set. I'm recommending that they do at least 2 tubes, because the white is used to mix all the other colors. If you want a nice cooler shade, you go ahead and you mix with white, or you can mix with another cooler tone like the periwinkle kind of effect that I had going on. So see how I'm blending into my filler just for a smoother transition, so I don't go ahead and overwork it. There are areas that's already dry, so I'm just doing a drag and pull motion as well as a filler. So just a slight filler to get the sky looking as if it's actually there. If you look at your clouds, they're just not one shade. They're a little bit gray, a little bit blue, a little bit white. They look like pillows, they're fluffy. So those are cumulus clouds, and you do want to have those clouds looking nice and outstanding. They're actually alto cumulus clouds, if I'm not mistaken, and I remember my clouds correctly. All right, I did mention that we should have 2 clear jars of water. Yes, one for cleaning your brush and also one for just wetting the tip of your brush. So if you're transitioning into a new color, that you don't want to get muddied onto your paper, go ahead and use your nice clean water to get that done. But for me, because I'm just using the same shade, even though it's blue, the water now look a little bit gray or bluish. I don't mind, even though I'm hitting, also dipping my brush into the same bluish water. It is fine because I'm looking for a nice blue tint onto my clouds. So that is perfectly fine with me. If you just want to use nice clear water, that's fine. But sometimes I find the water itself give you a nice mix to your shade. So meaning if you're looking for nice blue, soft blue to just outline or just barely mix into your color or whatever shade you're using, the water itself already carries the pigment, so you don't have to go ahead and play around in picking up the right shade to do any mixing or blending, because the water already carries that dark shade. So I've done that, and I find it works a lot better for me too that way, so I don't have to worry about remixing or reapplying any soft shade that I want, because I'm already blending it into my main color. So that's a tip or a trick that I use. You can follow if you'd like. If not, and you are just comfortable using nice clean water and you prefer to go ahead and mix everything from scratch, and then that's fine as well. It's just your style, it's your preference. So this is something, once you start painting and you want to go faster and quicker, you'll find methods and tips that work for you, that will allow you not to, waste lots of time, but to get things done. So this is another thing that I do like. I like the idea of actually working into my subject. Sometimes we're a bit hesitant to do that because we just want the subject to stand alone by itself. But don't be afraid to actually blend things into your subject, because you know what? We want it to look real, and things are not real all by itself, standing alone. I also wanted to show you this method too, because I'm working on my clouds and sometimes they're just straight line stiff and you just don't want them to look like they're just sitting there. So I use the belly of my brush just to form that fluff, and then I do a drag and pull, but I don't want them to just look like I just slap them onto the paper. I want them to look like they're clouds. Clouds, sometimes you see an elephant, you see a puppy, a pillow. I know I'm being childish, but it's true. And you see all of that in the clouds. So you don't want them to look like they're just, standing still in there. You want them to look like they're alive and they're doing stuff like they normally do. They move around and they have weird shapes, and they look really beautiful because they're perfectly shaped. You know what I mean? So now my cloud's actually coming along. If you realize I'm working the layers over and over, they're repeated, but at the same time I'm allowing sections to dry. So I'm allowing the top to dry while I work on the bottom, and I'm allowing the body of the cloud to dry, right into the middle where my moon is, and then I take it in stage. So you just don't want to work all over the paper at one time. You want to think strategically, and you want to think, how am I going to allow my work to dry? I'm not using a heat gun at the moment, so already hair dryer. So hence that is what will happen. You have to be strategic if you are not using any external heating device and you're just using the air. So you want to do it in stages and layers. So I'm also doing a second layer to my top cloud. So what I've done is I've allowed it to dry, and then I'm adding straight from the tube, but I'm doing a little bit of blending in terms of mixing it a bit, and hint of water to get a nice creamy consistency so it actually move. But I don't want it to move too much because I'm now almost doing the finishing touches for my cloud. You don't want to overwork your painting. Always remember that. Sometimes less is more, right? You don't want it to look weird by having too much paint on at one time and it doesn't do what it needs to do. The effect is not, you're not achieving it because you're overworking it. Just like I'm overworking the top here. I figured it shaped quite well the last time and then I messed it up, I think. But you know what? It's fine for me because it does look like a cloud still. That's the beauty of working with gouache or watercolor. You can just make it do its own thing and it works. However, I had the option of actually allowing it to dry and then recreating that top portion of the moon, but that would have had to be that I had extra blue wash that I've already mixed for that particular moon portion, and I could rework it. And that is what I'm talking about reworking and making sure that you mix enough of the subject color, because once it's gone, if I'm going to try to recreate that moon, I'm sure it's not going to be consistent with the shade because I've added at least 2 layers on top of it. I've added the first wash, then I've done the second, and then I did the white to outline it. So I'm sure I'm not going to get the same consistency if I do that and try to get it. But even though I thought it was messed up, it still looked like a cloud, and it's obviously looking and shaping into a cloud that's hidden, a moon that's hidden behind the cloud. And that is still lovely. I like it. Alrighty, so I'm allowing it to dry a bit, and then I'm going to start working on the cloud itself, and that will be the faded cloud that is actually covering the moon a bit, slightly those distance cloud, as well as I'm doing a deep, this is actually a blue, and I've like a deep navy blue, and I've washed it out with a bit of ash white, so the white is already just mixed into the blue, a bit of black and blue mixed together, and then I'm using it to outline just the edges, the slight edges of the cloud that's below. And I'll do it for all of them, and I'll add a bit into the moon in order to make the moon not so white as it's blending into the cloud, but make it stand out a little bit more by using a varied shade, like a nice cooler but still dark tone to it, so it still have a slight shade, and I don't want to lose the dramatic effect that I had made previously on the first layer, but I want the moon to look a little bit outstanding and not just monotone blue that I made with the first wash. So as I mentioned, you can go ahead and play around with it like that. It is your artwork. Do whatever makes you happy and get you that result that you're looking for. Doing art doesn't mean that you have to stick to what everybody say or what you've traditionally learned. It is whatever you've learned is just a foundation for you to improve and develop on as an artist all by yourself. So with that, you will have your own technique, your own effects, and you will know what works best for you. So even though I'm teaching you, or I'm showing you actually a demo of what I'm doing with my simple explanation, you will learn a little bit of tip and trick as to find out what it is that you actually want to achieve. If you're creating this, you could say, I would have done that differently, I probably would have done that, but you won't know unless you actually apply it to the paper. So I always say to people, don't criticize something unless you actually have done it, or let me see your work, your artwork, you're doing. So because everyone's work react differently, meaning the outcome's not always the same. If you were to replicate this painting I'm sure you probably won't get the exact values and outcome as I did, but you will get as close as possible because you're watching and seeing what I'm doing. So the idea is planted in your mind as to what you could or should have done in order to achieve a result similar to this, but not exactly as I'm doing. Certain things you can do to get the same effect. So the effect is what you're learning, but the actual same result is what you have to work on for yourself, because you will not get the same result, but you will get similar. I know that's a little bit of rambling, but it is true. Because how I'm thinking I'm doing my painting, when you start adding paint to your paper, your mind will start thinking totally different. And your mind works on things that you've seen before, pictures you've encountered, shades and values, and all that thing just start that you personally have seen and encountered start rolling in your mind, and your mind is thinking a lot different than mine. So even though you have an idea and you're seeing what I'm doing, but because of your lifestyle, things that you've encountered, places you've been, all these pictures start popping up in your mind and give you a concept of what you like and what you would like to produce. Even though you're watching and you're learning, but you're watching and learning for the effects rather than for simply replication. Alrighty, so I do hope you enjoy this. I'm going to let the video roll and you can pick up a tip or two of what you really want to achieve or take away from this video so you can apply to your personal painting. Alright, I hope that you've learned something that will improve your skill or your artwork, and that you can also teach someone else to as well. Okay, so this is my idea of my cloud with my moon in the backdrop, and the rest of the painting will just do the final touches of adding effects and also slight highlights. Alrighty, have a good one. Bye.